just as a reminder to anybody who may think, oh, we're going to get Trump sympathetic jurors in this case, I always think back to the Manafort trial. And there was one woman who was a very, full-fledged Trump supporter. She came out, spoke about it quite openly afterwards, and yet she was able to render that guilty verdict for Paul Manafort. I think even from our perspective, whatever our preconceptions about jurors may be, when you get in that environment and you are exposed to facts, when you get the lights turned on, like we try to do in this show, not just for people who are against Trump, but especially for people who are, like me, who used to support him. We want to wake people up. We want to shed light. And when you get in that environment of really seeing the facts fleshed out, even people who you think are predisposed to defend him could definitely rule against him.
Oh, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think when people get on a jury, the gravity of the situation, even in cases that are purely about money or let's say something small like a second-degree theft type of situation, people take that job very seriously.
Very seriously.
They take that oath and they really do try to be fair. I don't think you really get many people who say, oh, I'm going to get on that jury. I'm going to make sure I either convict or I'm going to acquit. That's rare. They may get on there and start to have some kind of visceral reaction, which makes it hard for them to just be objective and look at the evidence. But I don't think many folks ever get on the jury thinking I'm going to be like the secret weapon here for somebody, the prosecution or for the defense. I think they work very hard to be fair, and it's actually very hard for them. I've talked with a lot of jurors, and it's a hard decision for them to make, to have to look at someone there in the courtroom and decide, we think you're guilty of this. It's sort of hard to pass judgment for people.
Well, we're sending lots of strength and courage to these these jurors that end up on that jury pool, because God knows the world and the country is depending on them to have that strength of that principle, that purpose and fearlessness when rendering their verdict. But speaking of getting to that verdict, Shan, I know you have spent a good amount of time correcting the record on suggestions that this case is weak, or that it's, not meaningful, or, just not strong in comparison to other Trump legal cases. Can you explain why that is absolutely not the case?
Sure. I think the important thing to understand about how strong the case is that it's basically a documents case, which makes it a very strong case when the prosecution has the documents, which they do. And the heart of the case is simply that there was this plan to pay different people so that you could control whether they speak or not. In Stormy Daniels' case, was literally like a NDA type of thing where you're going to get paid not to talk about this. It was part of this bigger strategy with the National Enquirer that they called catch and kill, meaning pretending to do journalism. We're going to pay you for an exclusive. Don't talk to anybody else. But then we never run the exclusive, so you can't talk to anybody else. We paid you. We can kill the story. That's the catch and kill idea. Why that makes for a really strong case is it's easy to show that those things happened, and it's easy to show that the way that it was fictionalized in the business records is false. And that's the basic violation, is creating false business records in the Stormy Daniels situation to hide the fact that was a payment to her made for that purpose, that they tried to make it sound like, oh, these are Michael Cohen's like invoices for legal work. That's going to be very easy to show, even holding aside having Michael Cohen or Stormy Daniels testify. Just on the paperwork itself, pretty rock solid. The next thing they need to prove is that there's an intent to cause some other kind of felony. That's how they get up to the felony level with these business records violations. And that's going to be the election interference aspect of it. And that's why, we talk about it being more of an election interference case rather than a hush money case, because it's not illegal to pay someone to be quiet about something. It's just a contract like anything else. It becomes illegal when you're doing it for this purpose of helping your campaign, helping your election, but you don't call it that. You try and pretend it's something else. And that's the second part that they'll need to show. That one, not quite as a slam dunk, but the circumstantial evidence there is super, super strong when you look at the timing of when all this happened, so close to the actual election. And you look at the terrific fallout that was happening for Trump negative fallout from that Access
Access
Hollywood
Hollywood.
tape. Yeah, exactly. So when you put those together, it's really a very straightforward case. And even his defenses, I think, end up hurting him. Like, it most likely one of the defenses we've heard about is, oh, I didn't do this to interfere with the election. I did it because I didn't want Melania to find out about this. That's not really going to help, because the only reason you're so worried about Melania finding out is exactly the same reason why you don't want it to hurt you in the elections. I think he's really got a problem there.
Yeah. Do you know where I was on Access Hollywood weekend?
No, where were you?
I was in Trump Tower, and I was banned from Trump Tower because
Wow.
they were in they were obsessed with keeping me quiet
Right.
because I was being slandered and had this unbelievable attack going on from the man who hired me, who didn't like that I had been promoted, was spreading crazy rumors about me rummaging through people's offices and trying to sell stories to the media, all false. I was completely terrified and under siege. And instead of doing anything to handle the situation, they banned me from Trump Tower and sent me to Colorado. So I know a little bit about their damage control efforts surrounding Access Hollywood weekend. And I can tell you one thing, it had nothing to do with Melania. They wanted everything in their power to be done to control the narrative that came out of that Access Hollywood leak. And you better believe that this silencing of Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal were absolutely tied to that.
I do want to say here, we can talk about this some other time, but I really just want to say that I'm really honored to be here with you, because your courage in taking that step and really creating this legal precedent is so important, not really just because of the effect it has on Trump and witnesses, but really what we're beginning to see from a very macro level is this strategy by people like Trump of really using civil litigation, i.e. their money, to affect the overall system. And you're seeing that really collide here, because he's got a criminal case and he's using these sorts of civil strong arm abusive tactics to have tried to control that. And, for a long time throughout history, that works for the rich and powerful. And it's a rare circumstance where someone as courageous as you comes out and really tries to put a stop to it. And that's made a huge difference here. And I think it's going to make a huge difference going forward. So many folks who don't have the means, who are intimidated, or like, oh my gosh, I signed an NDA, they're going to crush me, they're going to litigate me to death. And you really showed them that you don't have to be afraid to speak the truth. So very happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much, Shan. You're really warming my heart. Thank you so much. That's been my goal. It's been my goal both to inspire others, and like I always say, to break down the illegal barriers between Trump and accountability, because that's what I always really saw this NDA as. It wasn't something that was keeping people from writing soap operas about Trump. It was something that was keeping Donald Trump from being held criminally and civilly accountable for his wrongdoing. So thank you so much for acknowledging that. I really appreciate it. But yeah, we could just continue this conversation about, I would like to get your thoughts on this, actually. Speaking of my precedent that was cited by Angoran, because it's tied into this whole Weisselberg situation, where Weisselberg is once again behind bars because he's got this $2 million. I mean, it seems like I think about that 130,000, like such a low price for Stormy Daniels. Even 2 million, such a low price to send a 76-year-old man back to prison. I mean, buddy, really? Like, start speaking the truth.
Right. Well, I think in practical terms, though, that it's a lot more than 2 million. It's all of the other support that he's gotten. Who knows what sort of support his family members get. We've had some hints about that. It's much more than just that. And also, it's his own frame of reference in the world. He thinks of himself, I think I'm playing psychologist, as a loyalist. And that's the way he's going to play it out for the rest of his life. You're right. That 2 million is a drop in the bucket. I don't think I would go to jail for 10 days for 2 million.
Yeah.
2 days, I think about it. But this guy going back to freaking Rikers Island, gosh, this is not like, some federal little park that he goes to with the minimum security. That's a very unpleasant environment, for a person his age or for anyone to be in. And I find that just kind of mind-boggling. But what I also actually find really questionable, and it's interesting, and again, it kind of goes back to your bringing sunlight into this NDA illegality issue. I have to say, as a former prosecutor, that sounds a lot like obstruction of justice. I mean, you're basically telling someone, we're going to pay you if you don't cooperate. Now, it's only voluntary cooperation, whatever that means, right? So we're not telling you to defy the subpoena, but that's something that really deserves a little bit more probing there on what's going on there, because really, it's really just like, it's like saying it's a bribe. It's like, here's 2 million. Don't talk to these people. Sure, show up, if you want to, but don't tell them anything. And that's very, very questionable. And that's really what that type of an NDA was trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, how would, so I even asked my own lawyer this. I said, how would Weisselberg, like, in other words, could he violate this NDA because it's illegal and still get his $2 million? Like, do you think he'd have a legal leg to stand on?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right?
I think the problem is Weisselberg doesn't want to violate it. He wants the 2 million, and he wants to stay, on that side of the line as a loyalist to Trump. But if you want to violate it, sure. I mean, what I would advise him to do is, speak the truth, be truthful and cooperative, and then if they try not to pay you your 2 million or claw it back, I'm not sure if you already received some portion of it.
Sue him for it.
Then you sue them, exactly.
Yeah.
And then let them fight it out over, how much this was, quote, voluntary versus involuntary compulsion, which I think is holding aside the whole illegality of the NDA. That is a factual morass. Okay, I've been subpoenaed to the grand jury. I have to tell the truth. So that part is involuntary. Once I'm in there talking to them, how is everything I'm saying not under my grand jury compulsion? How can you make a claim I don't get paid because I did something voluntarily? Language in that agreement, like you can't go out and deliberately disparage, the organization or someone in it. That's easy. He's not like going out there, writing articles saying, I hate this organization, they're corrupt. All he is doing is meeting with law enforcement, testifying truthfully. I think it'll be very, very hard for them to argue that he is in breach of contract on that agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, heroism awaits, Mr. Weisselberg. Heroism awaits. Grow some balls at 76. But let's just, speaking about behind bars, something that just gets at me, and I think it gets at everybody who is watching this situation from an equity justice standpoint, seeing Donald Trump free. He's got a gag order in place. The gag order prevents him from making public statements about probable trial witnesses, quote, concerning their potential participation in the investigation or in this criminal proceeding. Just this week, Trump called Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, who are obviously witnesses in this case, quote, two sleazebags who have, with their lies and misrepresentations, cost our country dearly. Why, Shan, can you tell me with any logic why Donald Trump is not in violation of this gag order and or behind bars for it?
No, he's definitely in violation of the gag order. Whether or not being in violation of it would immediately place him behind bars, I think that's a couple of steps they have to go through. Yeah. So first, again, it's my belief, I have no inside knowledge on this, I don't think Merchan's going to do anything about that gag order until they get the trial underway, because I think he thinks that will just be a huge sideshow. Figures we're not going to get into that right now. The steps he could take to enforce it, very unlikely that he would just throw Trump in jail. I think more likely you would see an escalating series of fines that would maybe double, triple each time that it happened, until you built a record where there are multiple violations. Okay, well, next time you're going in. He doesn't have to go in for days and days for the whole trial, but you can go in for an afternoon, go in for overnight, but really sending a strong message that I'm not going to play this game with you where you're finding ways to get around this, or you just blatantly violate it and try to dare me to enforce it. There's so much talk about how I see lots of good commentators, political as well as legal ones, saying this is a former president. You just can't throw him in jail. It's simply not true. I mean, maybe there's some logistics about the Secret Service, but
figure it out.
Right? It's just not that big of a deal. And it's certainly, I can tell you, there's no client of mine that could ever have said anything resembling this stuff without being in jail at this point. And most people who are facing, was it 90 some plus counts in different cases across the country, they would be in jail right now. They'd be held pretrial because they're deemed a risk of flight. There's too many consequences coming down. So you know this, but it's particularly ironic when Trump supporters talk about this two-tier system of justice. I mean, there absolutely is a two-tier system of justice. He's in the top tier and he gets treated very well. So yeah, anybody else would either have been fined very significant amounts by now, or they would have been put in jail for violating the gag order.
Yeah, let's keep it real, Shan. All right.